don't always quit out loud. Sometimes they simply stop chasing. You don't see a loud announcement or a dramatic collapse. You see a subtle retreat, a silent unhooking from a world that once seemed worth pursuing. And when emotionally aware people do this, it's not because they're fragile, it's because they finally see the cost. There's a quiet pattern emerging. Individuals who possess deep emotional insight, those who spent years developing self-awareness, decoding their reactions, tracking their wounds, are increasingly choosing to disengage from traditional markers of success. Promotions don't hold the same gravity. Recognition feels hollow. The pursuit of more becomes less compelling. On the surface, this looks like burnout or apathy. But under the surface, something far more intelligent is happening. A reckoning with an internal conflict that can no longer be silenced. Modern success culture operates on momentum and illusion. It glorifies overextension. It rewards endurance. But emotionally attuned individuals aren't wired to bypass their internal signals for long. They can't ignore the unease. They can't normalize dissonance. And eventually, they reach a breaking point. Not always through crisis, but often through clarity. A moment comes when they realize the ladder they've been climbing doesn't lead anywhere they actually want to be. Here's where the conflict deepens. These individuals were often high achievers to begin with. They know how to perform. They know how to conform. But they also carry a subtle, persistent ache, the awareness that their efforts are driven by something invisible and unresolved. And that awareness creates friction. Every achievement brings a brief spike of satisfaction, followed by a familiar hollowness. Every compliment feels good but not grounding. Over time, the pattern becomes intolerable. To understand this withdrawal, you have to examine the emotional architecture beneath it. Many emotionally aware adults carry childhood experiences marked by conditional affirmation. They learned early that love, approval, and safety were tied to performance. Not necessarily in overt or abusive ways. Sometimes it's as subtle as only being praised when achieving, only being noticed when excelling. Over years, this conditioning embeds a belief: my value depends on my output. That belief becomes the engine behind adult overachievement. It explains the perfectionism, the over-responsibility, the inability to rest. But emotional awareness eventually challenges the engine itself. These individuals start to notice how often they override their own discomfort to meet expectations, how they dismiss their own intuition in order to fit into frameworks they never consciously chose. And that noticing begins to unravel the contract they unconsciously signed years ago. The contract that said, if I succeed enough, I'll finally feel whole. It never works, and emotionally aware people know it, even if they can't always articulate it. The moment that realization crystallizes, success, as it's traditionally defined, begins to lose its grip. The performance starts to feel absurd. The striving starts to feel false. And slowly, they begin to step back, not because they failed, but because they finally stopped lying to themselves. This withdrawal isn't laziness. It's not nihilism. It's the result of deep internal recalibration. It's a shift from external validation to internal coherence. And coherence doesn't always pay well. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't fit neatly into quarterly objectives or personal branding strategies, but it's real. And once someone has tasted it, pretending becomes impossible. There's a kind of grief involved in this process. Grieving the years spent chasing someone else's idea of fulfillment. Grieving the parts of the self that were contorted to fit the mold. But there's also liberation. Withdrawing from traditional success opens the space for something quieter, but far more durable. Alignment. The ability to act from wholeness rather than hunger. The capacity to rest without guilt. To succeed without self-betrayal. When emotionally aware people withdraw from modern success, it isn't a retreat, it's a refusal. A refusal to participate in systems that thrive on unhealed wounds. A refusal to be measured by metrics that ignore depth, nuance, or context. It's not that they no longer want to contribute, it's that they want to do so without abandoning themselves. And that distinction matters, because the world doesn't need more high-functioning people who are quietly dying inside. It needs individuals who are grounded enough to know when the game is no longer worth playing. People who are willing to dismantle inherited definitions of worth and build something more human in its place. So when someone begins to step back, don't assume they've lost their ambition. Consider the possibility that they've found their center. And once you find that center, it becomes harder and harder to trade it for applause. That's where we begin. Because beneath the surface of emotional withdrawal lies not weakness, but wisdom. And in the parts that follow, we'll explore the hidden inheritance behind that wisdom and why so many people are just now starting to listen to it.
The need to prove yourself is rarely born in adulthood. It's inherited, quietly, unconsciously, and often invisibly. People don't just pursue success, they're compelled toward it, driven by something older than logic, older than ambition. And for emotionally aware individuals, that realization doesn't arrive early. It arrives after years of playing the game flawlessly and still feeling empty. What appears to be self-discipline is often self-defense in disguise. The long hours, the overcommitment, the chronic competence. These aren't just personality traits, they're adaptive responses. When someone grows up in an environment where their worth is tied to how useful, compliant, or impressive they are, they learn to associate identity with utility. Not just that they can perform, but that they must, because without performance, they fear they might disappear. This isn't conscious. It lives deep beneath the surface, embedded in the nervous system. Childhood doesn't teach in statements, it teaches in patterns. And one of the most damaging patterns is inconsistency in emotional safety. Praise that's conditional, love that's transactional, attention that comes only after achievement. Over time, a child internalizes a dangerous equation. If I succeed, I am seen. If I fail, I am forgotten. Now fast forward 20 or 30 years. That same child becomes a professional adult, appearing confident and accomplished. But beneath the surface, their striving is tethered to a fear they can't name. A fear of inadequacy, of being exposed as not enough. So they chase the next goal, the next title, the next salary band. Not because they're greedy, but because the chase keeps the fear quiet, temporarily. Emotionally aware people eventually catch this pattern, often through exhaustion, but sometimes through stillness. They notice that their sense of self collapses without constant motion, that rest feels unsafe, that success doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure. And then the insight lands. The drive they thought was ambition is actually inheritance, not a legacy of vision, but a legacy of survival. This is the emotional inheritance that most success culture refuses to acknowledge. That many adults are unconsciously reenacting unresolved attachment patterns through their careers. That the corporate ladder is for some just a disguised cry for approval. That achievement becomes a socially sanctioned way to soothe childhood wounds. But wounds can't be healed by repeating the same strategies that caused them. They can only be healed when brought into awareness and then released. And that's where conflict begins. Because letting go of these inherited drives doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like loss. Loss of identity. Loss of direction. The part of the psyche that spent decades equating worth with work doesn't go quietly. It resists. It panics. It tells you that without the next milestone, you'll become irrelevant, that your life will collapse. But these are not truths. They are defense mechanisms. And emotionally aware people know the difference. This is the quiet war that plays out internally. One side says, keep going, just a little more and you'll feel safe. The other says, you've done enough, you can stop now. Most never reach this crossroads because they never pause long enough to notice it. But those who do, those who've built the capacity to sit with discomfort rather than run from it, begin to see the game for what it is: a loop. The loop says your next achievement will heal you, but it never does. It only resets the cycle. And when you finally see that cycle clearly, your relationship with success fundamentally changes. It stops being about validation, it becomes about alignment. You no longer ask, what will make me look impressive? You ask, what actually matters to me? And more often than not, the answers are quiet, unmarketable, and unmonetized. But here's the tension. Society is structured to reward the loop, to climb, to hustle, to accumulate. So stepping out of that loop doesn't just require awareness, it requires grief. Grieving the version of yourself that did everything right and still felt empty. Grieving the realization that your most praised behaviors were born from pain. Grieving that no amount of external affirmation will ever be enough to repair a belief that you are only as good as your output. And after the grief, something new emerges, a more honest ambition, one not rooted in lack, but in clarity. You begin to want things not because they'll prove your worth, but because they're expressions of it. You stop chasing goals that make you look successful and start building a life that actually feels sustainable. This shift is not glamorous. It rarely comes with recognition, but it is profound. Because when you stop performing for an audience you didn't choose, you start hearing your own voice again. The one that existed before fear taught you to filter it. The one that doesn't need to be spectacular, just sincere. Emotionally aware people withdraw not because they lack direction, but because they're done being driven by ghosts. And in that pause, they don't lose themselves. They begin, finally, to come home.
There comes a point when the system breaks, not because it failed, but because it worked. The job was landed, the performance delivered, the status achieved, but the emptiness remained. And for emotionally aware people, that's the turning point. Not the absence of success, but the presence of it without fulfillment. That's when burnout isn't just exhaustion, it becomes revelation. What most people call burnout is often misunderstood. It's not always about being overworked. It's about being out of alignment. You can work long hours and still feel alive if the work reflects your values. But when every day becomes an act of emotional dislocation, when your internal truth is silenced for the sake of external productivity, then burnout is inevitable. Not because you're weak, but because you're paying attention. Emotionally aware individuals reach this point differently. They've usually spent years being praised for their reliability, their discipline, their drive, but underneath those traits is something more complicated. A false self, a persona constructed not from authenticity, but from expectation. It looks successful on the outside, but it's hollow inside. And eventually, the psyche revolts. This revolt doesn't always look dramatic. It can begin quietly. Difficulty concentrating, a loss of motivation, an unshakable fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. But beneath the symptoms is something deeper, a psychological collapse of coherence. The person they've been playing no longer feels sustainable. And for emotionally aware people, this isn't a breakdown, it's an awakening. This awakening is painful because it begins by exposing the lie that achievement would bring security, that doing more would finally make the anxiety go away, that being good, being productive, being indispensable would make them feel whole. It never does. And once that realization lands, it can't be undone. What follows is not laziness or resignation, it's a stripping away. The layers of overfunctioning, the compulsions to fix, to please, to win. These behaviors lose their grip because they're seeing clearly for the first time, not as strengths, but as survival strategies. Strategies that once made sense, but now only sustain disconnection. Here's where the culture misunderstands withdrawal. It sees it as failure, as disengagement. But emotionally aware people aren't giving up. They're stepping out of roles that required them to abandon their inner life, out of environments that rewarded dissociation over depth, out of identities that were built on being needed, not known. This process isn't linear. It comes with fear, with doubt, with questions like, who am I without this role? Or what if I never feel motivated again? But beneath those questions is something honest. For the first time, the psyche is refusing to be coerced by fear. It's refusing to equate worth with work. And that refusal is the beginning of true psychological freedom. It's also where the old models begin to crumble. The model that says self-worth must be earned. The model that says burnout is a personal failure rather than a systemic one. The model that treats rest as a luxury instead of a necessity. These assumptions can no longer survive inside a person who is awake to their cost. And once someone sees this clearly, they can't return to pretending. They might still perform, still contribute, still succeed, but it won't be from the same place. It won't be from a place of fear. It will be from a place of conscious choice, a place where doing no longer defines being. Emotionally aware people often find themselves at odds with systems that reward suppression, because these systems weren't designed for wholeness. They were designed for output. And when you begin to value wholeness over output, you become inefficient by design. You become unpredictable, uncontrollable. You stop saying yes reflexively. You start asking whether the cost is worth it. That shift is not celebrated. It is often pathologized. But make no mistake, it is a sign of health. When your nervous system refuses to cooperate with inauthentic living, that's not dysfunction. That's recovery. Recovery from self-abandonment, recovery from identity addiction, recovery from the illusion that you must earn your existence. So when the burnout comes, and it will, don't rush to fix it. Don't medicate it with more goals. Listen to it. Because beneath the fatigue is a deeper voice, one that's been buried beneath performance for years. A voice that doesn't want to be impressive, it wants to be real. That's the paradox of awakening through burnout. What looks like collapse is often the first honest step towards psychological integrity. And those who are brave enough to follow it find something that the old system could never give them. A life that makes sense on the inside, even if it looks smaller on the outside. Because peace is not earned, it's reclaimed. And sometimes the only way to reclaim it is to let everything that isn't truly yours fall apart.
There's a moment after the burnout, after the collapse, after the silence sets in. It's the moment where the old identity no longer fits, but the new one hasn't formed yet. It's not relief, it's limbo. And for emotionally aware people, this is where the real work begins. The inner renegotiation, the slow, unglamorous process of sorting out what stays, what goes, and what was never theirs to begin with. You see, for years, they were fueled by reflexes, saying yes before thinking, taking responsibility that was never theirs, chasing goals that were inherited, not chosen. But now those patterns no longer function. The engine that ran on guilt and fear has sputtered out. And in the quiet that follows, a deeper question emerges. If I'm not doing this to be loved, respected, or safe, then why am I doing it at all? This is not a question of goals. It's a question of foundation. And it forces a confrontation with the architecture of self-worth. When you remove achievement, productivity, and approval, what's left? If you've been conditioned to equate value with output, the answer might be, not much. And that's where the disorientation begins. Emotionally aware individuals don't just stop chasing, they start excavating. They begin to interrogate every internalized voice that once dictated their path. Whose standards are these? Whose expectations am I still performing for? Why does rest still feel like failure? Why does choosing less still feel like shame? This is not overthinking. This is repair. They are dismantling the internal system that told them to betray their own needs in exchange for belonging. And that system runs deep. It was built in childhood, reinforced by culture, and rewarded by institutions. It doesn't fall apart overnight. The renegotiation begins with discomfort, because the old rewards, praise, prestige, progress, are no longer motivating. They've been exposed as hollow. But the new motivations, authenticity, integrity, alignment, are still unfamiliar. And the world doesn't offer much support for them. In fact, it often punishes them. This is where the isolation sets in. Not because others abandon you, but because they no longer understand you. The parts of your personality that once made you predictable, your overfunctioning, your hypercompetence, your automatic availability, begin to dissolve. And in their place is someone quieter, slower, more discerning, someone who doesn't jump to fix, someone who doesn't need to win, someone who's no longer trying to be everything to everyone. But don't mistake this shift for regression. This is maturation. This is what it looks like to evolve out of a trauma-adapted identity and into something rooted in truth. A person who no longer seeks external confirmation of their internal worth is not lost. They're just done outsourcing their power. Yet the cost is real. In systems built on performance, being whole is often seen as being difficult, not because you're combative, but because you no longer comply reflexively. You start to say no without guilt. You start to protect your energy. You stop explaining yourself. You let silence speak where performance once lived. And to the untrained eye, this looks like arrogance. But it's not. It's self-respect. Renegotiating your relationship to ambition is one of the most radical acts of emotional liberation, because it means detaching from the fantasy that one more success will finally make you feel safe. It means facing the emptiness that success was meant to mask. And it means cultivating a new metric. Not how much did I accomplish today, but did I betray myself today?
This metric is not efficient. It won't scale. It won't impress anyone, but it will create a kind of inner alignment that no title or trophy can match. And from that alignment, a new kind of ambition is born. One that is not reactive, but responsive. Not compensatory, but creative. You begin to choose work that reflects your values, not your wounds. You build boundaries that protect your peace, not your image. You relate to success not as salvation, but as a tool. Valuable, yes, but never worth your soul. This is not the end of striving. It's the end of striving for the wrong reasons. You don't stop creating, you stop contorting. You don't stop pursuing, you stop performing. What you build from here is still ambitious, but it's grounded in truth, not trauma. And here's the paradox. Once you stop chasing validation, your work becomes more potent. Not because it's louder, but because it's cleaner. It's not trying to manipulate an outcome. It's not trying to fill a void. It simply expresses what is real. And that kind of work doesn't just succeed, it liberates. So when you find yourself renegotiating your ambition, know this: it's not a crisis. It's a return. A return to the part of you that was never broken, just buried. A part of you that doesn't need to be impressive, only honest. Because the world doesn't need more high achievers on the verge of collapse. It needs people who know how to win without disappearing. People who know how to strive without suffering. People who've made peace with themselves and refuse to trade that peace for applause.
They never made an announcement. There was no dramatic exit, no manifesto posted online. One day, they were in every room, leading every project, always available. And then, they just weren't. Not out of bitterness, not from defeat, but because something within them had shifted. Something irreversible. This is how emotionally aware people reclaim themselves. Quietly, deliberately, and entirely on their own terms. The withdrawal isn't a retreat from life, it's a realignment with it. What looks like stepping back is actually stepping into a relationship with self that no longer tolerates performance as a condition for worth, into a rhythm where success is no longer an escape, but an extension of truth, where ambition is no longer armor, but expression. By the time someone reaches this place, they've already paid the price. They've run the race others said they needed to run. They've ticked the boxes, climbed the ladder, played the part. They've achieved, often at a level others envy. But internally, they've reached a different finish line, one that isn't marked by applause, but by peace. That peace didn't come easy. It came through dismantling illusions that were never questioned out loud. The illusion that value must be proved, that self-worth is a reward for compliance, that if you just do enough for long enough, the anxiety will finally leave you alone. It never did, because the problem was never the volume of success, it was the vacancy behind it. So now, these individuals no longer chase what they once did, not because they stopped caring, but because they started caring differently. Success that demands the betrayal of their inner truth is no longer desirable. Work that silences their intuition is no longer viable. Relationships that depend on their self-abandonment are no longer sustainable. From the outside, this new way of being might look like underperformance, a step down, playing small. But internally, it's an upgrade in every direction.
They are no longer run by invisible contracts signed in childhood, no longer governed by anxiety disguised as motivation, no longer addicted to the high of being needed. Instead, they move through life with a different compass. They ask, is this aligned? Not, will this impress? They choose what nurtures their nervous system, not what inflates their ego. They allow space for boredom, for silence, for slowness, because they no longer fear what those spaces will reveal. And what they discover there is profound. They find that the core of their being is not hollow, as they once feared. It was simply unheard, buried under years of conditioning. Beneath the noise of expectations and urgency and image was a quiet, steady truth. A truth that never asked to be exceptional, only to be real. And now that truth is leading. They may still work, still create, still contribute, but the energy is different, clean, grounded. They don't do it to earn identity, they do it to express it. And that difference changes everything. Because when people reclaim themselves, they stop perpetuating the cycles that wounded them. They stop building success on scarcity. They stop replicating systems that reward disconnection. And in their quiet refusal to participate in that madness, they create something rare, a life with integrity. They don't need to be everywhere anymore. They don't need to explain. Their presence is no longer currency, it's gift. And that gift is offered selectively, intentionally, from a place that doesn't need recognition to feel real. This is the quiet reclaiming. Not flashy, not loud, but whole. It's the moment when you realize you no longer need to be extraordinary to justify your existence. You simply need to be true. And from that place, you build, slowly, honestly, without urgency, without apology. You build a life that mirrors your values, not your fears. You engage with the world not from lack, but from fullness. Not to prove, but to participate. Not to win, but to witness. So when emotionally aware people withdraw from modern success, it is not the end of their ambition. It is the birth of their sovereignty. They are not quitting. They are coming home. And in that return lies the future we've all been starving for. A future where success doesn't cost the soul. A future where presence is power. A future where being is finally enough.